Unalienable populism, the idea that our rights are inherent, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's the power of the people, not the elite. This is our legacy. Join Dale Copperenis as he explores these rights in the present time. Welcome!
All right, yes, welcome to Unalienable Populism. Today we're going to discuss the responsibilities we all have in exercising the unalienable rights God has given us. The line most everyone has heard from the Declaration of Independence is, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And some may even remember that the following line in the Declaration states that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. But few realize what this really means, because it goes on in the Declaration to say that whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, in other words, those ends being keeping the unalienable rights God has given us, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. And if we jump down a little bit, it says that accordingly, all experience has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. In other words, people will suffer quite a bit before they are ready to end the government that they are dealing with. But it continues in the Declaration, when a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably the same object evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, in other words, the people's right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security, new guards being a new government. This means the people bear a lot of responsibility, something I think too many have forgotten. And that responsibility is not only in consenting to a government that is there, but holding that government accountable so that the safeguards and so that it safeguards the unalienable rights which God has given us. Mm-hmm. My next guest has fought the good fight to keep the government accountable for many years. Jim Carlin is a lawyer in Sioux City, Iowa. He served in the Iowa House of Representatives and then in the Iowa Senate from 2017 to 2023, where he was not the most popular person in the legislature because he kept reminding them of their responsibility to the people of Iowa. Jim then challenged establishment icon Chuck Grassley for the U.S. Senate seat in 2022, and then up-and-coming establishment sweetheart Ashley Hinson in 2026. And although he was unsuccessful in both those Republican primary bids, he traveled all over Iowa, reminding people of their responsibility to hold those in governmental power accountable to their true purpose, protecting the rights God has given every person. So, Jim, welcome to Unalienable Populism. Thank you for joining me.
Hey, thanks for having me, Dale. It's always good to see you, man.
Yeah, it's for those who don't know, I actually helped Jim in his last U.S. Senate bid, and we worked very closely together. It was a great opportunity to not only see Iowa, but to hear a true fighter for America in Jim Carlin, and I'm very glad that you're my first guest. So this is awesome. So to get started, I'd like to know, Jim, what is your view of the responsibility people have in regards to their government, just people in general?
Well, Jefferson said the only way you keep it is eternal vigilance. Franklin said a republic if you can keep it. They were right. We're living in the reality of those admonitions in this very day. You and I both know that the reason we got into this is, if we're honest about where things are going, based on what we're seeing, the incursion of government into our everyday lives, our economic realities, the culture we live in, how our children are being raised, indoctrinated in public schools, and a departure really from two things: a a moral culture, a culture that's grounded in Christian faith that our founders knew and understood as indispensable to the preservation of freedom, but also the Constitution. And those are two boundaries that have to be stood for. And if they're not, history tells us that you're going to lose your freedom. And politicians, particularly establishment politicians, the war you and I fought in this last Senate campaign, that's not what defines them.
Mm-hmm.
They're more, what does define them are the business interests that control them, and how our whole process operates that way. It's defined that way, so that I hate the term the elites, because I'm a Republican. I'm not talking about some class warfare battle, Dale. You know that, but there are elites who wield enormous power over our political system. And we have to deal with the reality of that because they pick the candidates. We think we vote on candidates we elect. No, you vote on people that were handpicked to represent corporate interests that are heavily funded by corporations. So the outcome, unfortunately, is largely defined by all the corporate treasure trove money that goes into those campaign coffers for people they already picked. So it's not about representing us. It's about representing business interests. And you know what I campaigned on with the Federal Reserve, with health insurance, student loans, and agriculture, and the monopolization of our economy that's affecting our freedom.
Mm-hmm. So why do you think people have allowed things to get to the point where they are now? Because we, the people, have, the responsibility of making sure that our government is taking care of those rights that God gives us. It seems like people have fallen asleep. Why do you think that is?
Well, they are asleep. A lot of people are asleep, and they're asleep because they're comfortable. But I think they're beginning to wake up because they're starting to get a little uncomfortable. The temperature of our economics right now is getting a little hotter for a lot of people. And they're like, wait a minute. I can't afford a house, and my health insurance premiums have tripled, and my kid wants to go to college, and there's no way he can afford that. And they can see, because of the harsh economic realities that they're having to deal with in their everyday lives, not being able to pay bills, being relegated to a renter's existence. Something like 1 out of 3 Americans right now, Dale, has very significant medical cost debt. You factor that into all of this, the realities of the American people economically haven't been hurt like this since the Great Depression.
Mm-hmm. And it seems, from what I've been hearing, that there is a generational divide. That while people who are 50 and older, more likely 60 and older, tend to be fairly comfortable in their lives, the folks under 50, particularly under 35, are very, very unhappy with their situation. In fact, we've seen with the election of Mandami in New York City that people are willing to vote for very, very extreme folks because they're not happy with their current situation.
Well, should they be?
Exactly. So, in order for people to be given the right or a better option other than a radical like Mandami,
Mm-hmm.
and we have some here in Iowa who are quite radical. What can the regular folks do to try to get the establishment folks who have, like you said, basically made things so that they're insulated? They get all the money, they get all the press. They seem to have a game which folks who aren't happy can't break into. how can we deal with that?
I think we have to make the case. I think you can make the case by showing the degree to which politicians are controlled by corporate interests and getting the information out there in the public square. You individually have the capacity to get on your social media and get truth out there over what's really going on. If you're one of those people like me or like Dale, and you sit in front of that computer and you read a lot of stuff about a lot of things you don't like seeing happen to this country, you have a duty to get it out there. And that's, the grassroots people, we have to operate that way, but we have to be more intentional about it. I think, as I said, the temperature of the economic realities being created by government are self-evident now. I think people are kind of see their lives in the frame of debt servitude, and they're like, wait a minute. How do I get out of this? Like, how do I own a house? How do I get out of debt? And they think the narrative that the game is rigged is actually true, but the answer is not government. That's like thinking a bigger thief is going to alleviate the problems of a smaller thief. You give government more power, more control, you'll see more money, more freedom, more everything make its way out of your pockets and your everyday life and under the control and power over somebody you do not want to run your life. There's only one way to look at this problem, Dale, and that's history.
Mm-hmm.
History is the only way to look at it. And we should not ignore history, because history would tell us, hey, you're on the precipice, you're at a crossroads, you could go the wrong way. Some other countries went the wrong way. China, Russia, North Vietnam, North Korea. Socialism didn't lead them to any nirvana. It led them to genocidal outcomes with untold human suffering.
And yet here we have here in Iowa, and then in many states, and also at the federal level, we have a Republican Party which mouths great things at election time, but then in between elections goes and does those things which the people don't want, or they do things or they don't do things that they promise to do. We all remember about repealing and replacing Obamacare. The Republicans ran for many election cycles on that. And at first they said, well, we don't have the House, we can't do anything. We gave them the House in 2010. Well, we don't have the Senate. Well, we gave them the Senate in 2014. Oh no, but we don't have the White House. Well, Trump was elected in 2016. Now 2017, Republicans have all three branches of government, or I'm sorry, all three elected branches of government, and then the Republican establishment does nothing. And we still have Obamacare. So we are, and that's just one example. We can talk about the wall that's still not built because the established Republicans fought tooth and nail against President Trump on that. And even today, we're dealing with the feeling of going to war when people have said more than once they don't want to do that, and yet this is the Republican Party who's in charge, and they seem to be almost as much an enemy to the people as the socialist Democrat. I don't even want to call them Democrats anymore. They've gone over so far to the left. They're socialist, fascist, communists all rolled into one. But the Republican Party itself, the establishment, seems to be as much of a hindrance to we the people as any other group out there. So how do we deal with this establishment?
Well, so I think the answer to the points you just raised on the healthcare side with Obamacare, we're going to repeal it, we're going to replace it. Why didn't we do it? Too much money was being made by donors. They monopolized healthcare. They Their profits went up 200 and 300%. The big five insurance carriers that donate money to Republican campaigns. Why didn't we finish the wall? Corporations, they want the cheap labor, and they're gonna tell their people, their lobbyists, say, make sure you don't get this vote wrong on completing that wall. And so it always seems like there's just enough Republicans to vote the wrong way at the right time, so things just coincidentally don't seem to happen. And what the establishment does is they take turns being the bad guy on the issues. And, it's kabuki theater. The moral outrage, right? At speech time, like you alluded to the moral outrage. And then you get this out of left field, strange vote that completely contradicts what they said they were going to do. And you're like, how could that happen? Well, that's how. Money is driving the bus, and the American people are in the back seat being taken for a ride. And that is how it is. When I was a kid in the 70s, single earner families, a lot of us grew up in families where your dad worked and your mom stayed home and raised the kids. You could afford a house, groceries, 5, 6 kids. Now, mom and dad are both working. They can't afford a house, and the cost of groceries has exploded. And look at the standard of living. The standard of living as a metric in this country is in free fall, while the profits of huge corporations are exploding. And that's not a coincidence, because the government has helped making that happen.
Yeah, it's actually the textbook definition of fascism, where the government and business work hand in hand to help each other out while making sure the people just shut up and stay in line. It's a sad thing. It really is.
Oh, yeah.
So what is the what are some of the things that the people can do to make sure that we clean house? Because the only way things are going to get done is if enough people rise up to the point of demanding things, because otherwise, unless people demand things, the establishment from both parties is just going to keep on going the way they're going, because they're very happy to keep the status quo.
Mm-hmm. Well, the establishment is kept in power by telling conservatives to vote their way. There's only one Republican Party. You don't have a choice. The worst Republican is better than the best Democrat. All those lines. That's, you're going to lose everything. You're going to lose your freedom. Well, the same people that are telling us that are instrumental in the theft of private property rights in Iowa. And when I fought on the battlefield of faith values, pro-life, keeping gender identity garbage out of public schools and boys out of the girls' room and, those kinds of issues, they were a complete no-show until after I left, they could get some capital from it, some political capital where they can throw some crumbs from the table at the Christian Republican conservative base and, act like they've done a lot. They did pass ESAs, which was a big deal. But you and I have talked about this.
What, just for those who don't know, what ESA being what?
Education savings accounts. I worked on that for years because there are failing public schools in Iowa. And the best way I know to raise the bar is to introduce competition. And if you want your kids raised in a culture with some semblance of moral composition, you'd probably rather have your kid go to a Christian or Catholic school as opposed to a public school where there's a very aggressive LGBT agenda being pushed in elementary schools. That was something I fought against. But I don't want to get away from the point of your question.
Sure.
When people that we elect don't vote the way they say they were going to vote, when they give a speech and there's no follow through, when when they're on the wrong side of the aisle with their votes way too often, the next time the election cycle comes, sit it out. I'm not saying you don't vote in the other races. I'm not telling people to sit out entire election cycles. But for the ones who don't stay true and who do not align to the values of faith and the Constitution, let them lose. Let them lose. Because you're incentivizing the very kind of bad behavior that's undermining your faith and your constitutional rights and your own economic interests. You are being robbed blind. And worse yet, your children are being put on a terrible path, culturally and economically. And the only thing I know to do is leverage that vote that they're counting on, that they think they own you. The Christian Republican base in Iowa needs to tell the establishment base of this state, you don't own us, and you better start listening to us, or you're going to start losing a lot of elections.
What is your opinion on a third party? You know, there's been some talk. For example, Tucker Carlson his name's been put out there. Thomas Massey's been put out there. But regardless of who, there's talk of trying to get a third party to at least give to allow people like you and me and others who are just fed up with the establishment a way to make sure that the establishment gets the message that we've had enough.
Mm-hmm. I don't entirely disagree with that idea. I personally think that if enough Christians and constitutional patriots conspicuously sit out elections, they're going to have to start producing. Listen, at my core, I believe in the values of Lincoln and of Reagan. And I'm not a libertarian. I am a very liberty-minded person, but I wouldn't call myself a libertarian. I don't know that that's the way to play it, and I think the way to play it, politics is a leverage game, and we don't have the economic backing to start a third party to compete with the Democrat and Republican parties right now. We don't have the money as a group. We have votes. Mm-hmm. And votes represent power. And we should use the votes. If that's the tool that's in our hand, then we ought to use it and just hope to God we have legitimate elections, which I have real doubts about. But use your vote. If you know somebody's a rhino, and they really don't care about your values. And you and I, we've researched people. All you have to do is look up the box score of how they vote. There's plenty of conservative websites out there that regularly give scorecards. If they don't vote the way you want them to vote, don't vote for them. Just skip that race. They'll get the message. But a lot of us are going to have to do this. Mm-hmm. A lot of us, we're going to have to follow through on our let them lose narrative. I don't want Ashley Hinson representing us in the U.S. Senate, but I'm not going to vote for a Democrat. And I don't want the motivation to be perceived as some desire on my part to see a Democrat win. But the problem is the bar is now so low that the people that are winning the primaries bear no meaningful semblance to our faith in the Constitution, and that has to stop. And this is how we do it.
Yeah. Yeah. For example, for me personally, I have, I'm glad that Zach Lane is running for governor here in
Oh
Iowa.
my!
And I think he's going. I'm going to support him. I'm going to vote for him. But I have no intention of supporting either Ashley Hinson or the representative I have here in the first district, Miller Meeks. I have seen them both do everything, not everything, but enough to know that they are controlled by the corporate donors, and they are not for me as a citizen. They are there for the donors, and frankly, I don't want that, because the donors are, as we saw, you've seen for a lot more years than I did. They're not for we the people, and that
Not at all.
so that's my thing. And for those who are thinking about a third party, Jim's point about money is super important. You probably have no idea how expensive it is to run a campaign. It is amazingly expensive for even the simplest things, and you need to have gobs of money to run an effective campaign in any state. And then when you start talking about multiple campaigns, and it's just there's a lot that goes into that. So it falls back on the vote. So what would you say, Jim, to the and we brought it up slightly earlier, and we'll close with this. What would you say to the person who is being told, well, if you don't vote for us, you're going to get the Democrat, and the Democrat's so bad that you'll lose everything. So vote for this Republican who is a puppet of the donors. But don't look at that. Don't look at that. Just because they have an R next to their name, they're far better than the Democrat. So vote for the R.
Right.
How would you because we know some friends who feel that way.
Oh yeah, no, I had Republican colleagues send me a very nasty, vitriolic email, lambasting me, calling me a sore loser because I think let them lose is a better alternative to electing people that don't share our values. I would tell them this: trajectories are destinations. They're destinations. Let's look at our trajectory since the Reagan administration. Because more and more and more has our Republican base become weaker, morally, culturally, very, very diluted from the days of a Ronald Reagan to where we are now. Very, very diluted. And as we've watched the dilution of our party, our principles, our Constitution, we've seen our national debt grow 40-fold from what it was when President Reagan served us. A 40-fold increase in our national debt, that the realities of which have wreaked economic havoc on the middle class of this country like nothing else. Culturally, we are on a very poor trajectory. And the reason why we're on a poor trajectory is we're not being represented. Corporations are. So for the people that say, vote Republican, well, are you really voting Republican? Or are you voting corporation? Because yes. I don't see where you're any better off. I don't see young college graduates better off. Morally, people grossly underestimate the importance of just basic tenets of biblical morality. The implications are huge. Children need a mother. They need the nurture of a mother and the discipline and love and destiny, influence of a father and a mother. And when that's lost, kids have a much tougher go. And then you throw the economic realities of the national debt on their shoulders, the cost of a house on their shoulders, the cost of health care on their shoulders and the cost of higher education on their shoulders. And we are putting impossible burdens on our children that they will have to bear because we went along with this narrative that we should always vote Republican. I'm not buying that narrative anymore. And I would tell anybody else, do your homework on the people you elect. If they don't align with what you believe on your faith and on your economic interests, on the Constitution of the United States, just sit out that one particular race and cast your ballot, cast your vote in those other races.
Yeah, absolutely. There's nothing wrong with skipping or skipping a line. You don't have to. You don't have to vote in everything. You don't. So, Jim, I appreciate the time. Thank you so much. I look forward to having a continued conversation on this in the future. And I will be going down to the 1776 Law Center.
I know. I wish I was going
in a couple days. Yeah, I wish you would. I wish you would. But I expect to get a lot more information from there and pass it on to not only you, but to the rest of the folks who tune in. It's there. The bottom line is there are a lot of people who are feeling like they need to do something, but they're not sure what. And I think the big part of the message is letting the establishment lose, so that they get the message that we're not going to take it anymore. And that's an important message, because we don't want to get to the point where we have to where we, the people in general, get to the point where we do things that are really bad. And that's a dangerous place. We want to stop before then.
No, we gotta give them the tools to stand up for their rights. And, I know that Barnes and Barris are all about that. And I know you're about that. That's what we do. And, this is one of the tools in our toolbox, and we want to get that message out there. So.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Jim. And
thanks.
I will see if I can get this outro going here. Thank you for joining me on Unalienable Populism. Please like, subscribe, and share far and wide so we can make sure the voice of the people is heard.